President Trump taking to Truth Social Thursday to announce a new census with a few major changes. Quote, I have instructed our Department of Commerce to immediately begin work on a new and highly accurate census based on modern-day facts and figures, and importantly, using the results and information gained from the presidential election of 2024. People who are in our country illegally will not be counted in the census. If it happens, it would be a rather unprecedented move, as historically the census has never been conducted mid-decade and never excluded non-citizens. But it's not also a new idea for the Trump administration. There was a mid-decade census approved in the 70s, but it ultimately did not happen.
Now, back in 2019, the Supreme Court shot down a citizenship question on the 2020 census that was proposed by the first Trump administration, and some in the second Trump administration are saying because people living in the country illegally were counted, it was rigged in Democrats' favor.
Democrats rigged the 2020 census by including illegal aliens. Remember, they sued Donald Trump, they sued the administration, they fought tooth and nail to include illegal aliens in the census. 20 to 30 of House Democrat seats wouldn't exist but for illegal aliens.
So meantime, Trump's announcement has sparked outrage online from his critics. Midas Touch editor-in-chief Ron Bukowski wrote on X, quote, the next part of the plan to steal the midterms and or the 2028 election, an attempt to do a mid-decade census to take seats and electoral votes away from the blue states. I knew this was coming. So much to talk about here. First of all, there's going to be massive lawsuits and endless pushback. Like we mentioned in the read before we get into the conversation, this happened, something similar is to put your legal status on the census the first time that Trump was in office, and it was shot down. It didn't work by the Supreme Court. So it's kind of like, here we are revisiting it. But I think that people need to understand, like, the legal definition of the census is a national head count for all living people in the United States. And even though it's used to try to district properly and it literally is a head count. That's the point. It's an apolitical organization that's doing a head count for every living person in the U.S. And so I think that is what it's supposed to be. That's what it's doing. And I also know that in 2020, the census that was done showed that 2 years later, after much research and reports, that Black people, Hispanic people, and Native Americans were actually undercounted and white people were overcounted. And that is due to the pandemic and COVID and some people not taking the census seriously or not doing it. So either way, the census is going to be flawed, but they try to be apolitical. And so if we count all those people who didn't do the census or count all the people that were left out of the conversation and fix those numbers, we may be in the same exact situation. It's kind of like mincing, like pulling hairs to try to get to a goal that's ideal for the Republican Party or President Trump.
I think the important thing to point out about what the Republicans want to do here is it's not that they want to not count illegal aliens at all. What they want to do is delineate whether you are in the country legally or not. So there would be a full count to get a sense of the entire population of people residing in the United States. And then there would be a count of people who could be considered constituents, people who have some kind of allegiance to the United States, have the capacity to vote, etc., whether it's naturalized legal immigrants who have become American citizens, current American citizens, and you would still count legal immigrants in that question too.
Right.
But what it would do is make sure that when redistricting is done, that you are not counting people who are not constituents for the purpose of drawing congressional maps. And I think that is the way that most Americans believe it should be done. It's a way that's fair. It's a way that makes sure that people who are actually being represented by their elected officials are the ones who matter when it comes to drawing out those congressional maps. And it would make a huge difference. As Stephen Miller alluded to, there are an estimated 21 million illegal aliens in the United States. The census did mess up their numbers in 2020, as we talked about on Wednesday. And I think it's reasonable to say that having to wait 10 years for a new census to fix that count is, when it, according to the numbers, disadvantaged the Republicans most greatly by about 5 to 10 seats potentially. Having to wait 10 years to fix that when it's such an important part of political representation and democracy is not acceptable to me.
To me, this feels like a little bit of a tantrum. It's like, okay, if you guys won't come back to Texas and get this redistricting done, and then you guys are saying in liberal states you're going to retaliate and do the same thing, which, let me be clear, I'm adamantly against continuously gerrymandering and changing these maps for political reasons. I think the census and all of that should be intentional and created to do its job that it was supposed to do, is to make sure that all voices are represented. But when we look historically at how redistricting and gerrymandering has gone, a lot of times people of color are the one catching the brunt of that not going well, whether they're miscounted or in certain areas. And I actually have examples. So in Louisiana, there's about 33% black population, 6 congressional districts, and only one of them is like an all black district that they districted in that way. So they only have political power as people of color in that one area, which for 33% of the population of Louisiana, there should be several districts where black people are elaborate voices, because there are a lot of people down south that have thoughts. Whether they vote Democrat or Republican, their voices should be heard. That's the point of the census. That's the point of redistricting when you get that information. Also in Texas, there was a 95% population growth between black, Latino, and Asian communities. And somehow, when the maps were drawn, these communities were not given new seats or districts in any way. And so when we have examples of this happening and the brunt of it falling on people of color, I don't think that jumping in 5 years into a census and trying to redistrict for political favor is the right way to go either, because we know historically that hasn't worked and doesn't work. And both sides of the aisle should not be doing it, which is what I've been very clear about. I don't think we should get into this redistricting war. We should allow the Census Bureau to be apolitical and try to do its job to the best of its ability.
Yeah, I think on that Louisiana question, the Supreme Court obviously struck down that district that was majority minority because of concerns about Civil Rights Act violations. And the issue was not that things were gerrymandered to avoid minority districts, but that they were actually gerrymandered to create minority districts, including combining people from different geographic regions because they happen to have the same skin color, which is where it gets into that violation of the Civil Rights Act. And this has been long been an excuse by the Democratic Party to gerrymander, which is that they believe that even if people live in different cities or even different counties, if they have the same skin color, then they should be in the same district. That's not the way that we intended to draw our political maps. It was about making sure people from different geographic areas had the same level of representation and political power.
For sure. And I don't think, which is why I said there's definitely a history of Democrats also trying to use the political maps and gerrymander in their favor. And I said both parties should not be doing that, because then we get in a situation where whatever your interests are, whether it's getting more people of color to vote, whether it's getting more migrants to vote, or whether it's just getting more Republicans to be in more districts so you have more seats, these are all not the way that we should be moving forward, especially when there is a cry on both sides of the aisle for it to stop being so politicized. Some agencies of our government that are overly politicized, like now the Census Bureau, like we just talked about the FBI, like we're having a conversation about the Supreme Court earlier this week. I think that everybody in America should be disgusted by the fact that we are finding ways to retaliate and meet people exactly where they're at. Like, historically you did this, so here's how we're retaliating. Like, there has to be a point where we come together and figure out how to do this thing right. And I don't think part of that draining the swamp thing that President Trump said that he was going to do is by finding ways to make it work in his favor. That's what bureaucracy is all about, is like going with the status quo and continuing on the same things. And so I think there has to be like a real way forward. If you're going to count migrants, that's fine, and see who moved here and what happened. But I also don't think at the same time you should be trying to redistrict to get more seats directly for Republicans just because you think that's a good thing to do and you want to win the midterms. Those 2 points to me counteract each other.
Yeah, I mean, I take your point that sure, so there's Republicans doing this for political reasons, but at the same time, if the census admits that they got the count wrong and did disadvantage Republicans in the redistricting process, then that problem should be corrected. And we also,
but also the problem that they got people of color wrong and undercounted because they weren't participating.
Yeah, that should be fixed too.
Both
right?
of them have to be fixed, right?
So I mean, I agree. That's why I think this mid-decade census is a good idea.
We'll see what happens. Israel's latest occupation plan for Gaza has been approved. We'll break it down next. Don't go anywhere.